I'd like to call to order the September 28th, 2021 meeting of the City of West Palm Beach Historic Preservation Board. Can we please begin with a roll call?
Amanda Schuyler.
Here.
Kristen Kellogg. Let the record reflect that Kristen Kellogg is not present. Dan Pickney.
Here.
Gabriel Jaslowski.
Here.
Ken Breslauer.
Here.
Reginald Stambaugh.
Here.
Keith Williams.
Here.
Donna Tomaszewski.
Here. We now move on to approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do we have any changes to the agenda as presented?
No, Madam Chair, no changes per se. However, I did want to bring to the board's attention there is one new construction on consent because we did feel it was a straightforward case. And then there was one letter received by staff for 525 31st Street, which is on the agenda. So may I please read that into the record?
Yes.
Thank you. To whom it may concern, I have no problem with the additional construction that Daniel Becker is requesting as long as the project is completed in a reasonable time frame. I have lived across the street at 516 31st Street, West Palm Beach since November 1988, 32 years. The property was in bad shape since then and has deteriorated to the point if something is not done with it now, it should be demolished. We are a tight community, and I have talked with most of my neighbors on the 500 block of 31st Street, and we all agree. I was one of the residences that fought for Old Northwood to become a historic district, the first historic district of West Palm Beach. I am also a realtor for over 25 years and love the historic homes, but things need to change to get some of these bad homes renovated or demolished. We have 3 bad homes on the 500 block of 31st Street. Let's get this done and done now. Thank you, Frank. Frank Hinsman submitted that via email.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone on the board that would like to make a change to the agenda as presented?
Yes, case 21-67, 3110 Washington Road is incorrect since it was postponed because lack of quorum. And the minute says that David Lawrence gave a presentation, which is not correct.
Okay, so you would like to make a change to the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We can definitely do that. Before we approve the minutes and make any amendments to them, can we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting? Would someone like to make a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and Ms. White, do you need any further clarification on the minutes correction from?
Case 21-67 of last month meeting was continued to tonight's meeting for the lack of quorum without any kind of presentation from anybody.
Are there any further changes to the minutes as presented? Okay, can we have a motion to approve with that one amendment?
I move the board to approve with that amendment the meeting minutes of the meeting on August 24th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We now move on to the report of the Historic Preservation Planner.
Good evening, Frederique Metner, City Historic Preservation Planner. Since your last board meeting, staff has reviewed 119 Level 1 applications, 2 Level 2s, and completed 44 zoning reviews. The good news is that there'll be another staff person starting October 4th. Ann Hamilton will be joining us from Illinois. And those are my updates.
That's wonderful, and thank you for your hard work these past few months on your own. We now move on to remarks by the chairperson. The matters before us this evening are quasi-judicial in nature, which means we base our decisions on substantial, competent evidence that comes before us. We ask you to please keep that in mind when making comments. For each case, the applicant will have 10 minutes to make their presentation. If there is a demolition involved, they will have 15 minutes for their presentation, and we will be keeping time for the presentations this evening because we have a very long agenda. So Ms. White will notify you applicants once you have reached your time limit. After the applicant makes their presentation, staff will make a presentation. We will then open it up to public comment, which will be limited to 3 minutes per person. It will also be timed. After that, the applicant will have a chance for a rebuttal if they'd like to do so. And then we will go into executive session where we will make our decision. To lead into this, we need to let you know if we've had any conversations outside of this meeting. So we will now lead in with a declaration of ex parte.
No ex parte communications.
I've had some ex parte communication on case number 1958A, 227 Rugby Road. The architects had emailed me the plans and their modifications and changes, which I reviewed. Case number 2063, 301 Clematis, 300 Banyan. The architect gave me a presentation of their proposed design and changes, and I will need to recuse myself from the first case, case number 2167, 3110 Washington Road. My firm is working on the project.
Gabe Jaroslavsky. I had communications with the architect of case 21-73 on 210 Sunset Road. Also with the architect on case 21-67, 3110 Washington Road. I also received the email from case 19-58A on 227 Rugby Road, which I reviewed. And I had a private presentation with the architect and applicant of cases 21-62 and 21-63, 301 Clematis Street, but I can make my decisions on the evidence that will be presented tonight.
Amanda Skyer, I spoke with the architect for 3110 Washington Road. I also spoke with the architect for 227 Rugby Road. I had a presentation from the architect for 301 Clematis Street and 300 Banyan Boulevard. I also spoke with the attorney for those projects. I have had a presentation from the architect of 2415 South Flagler Drive. And I spoke with Ms. Mittner about all of the cases on tonight's agenda, but I can base my decision on the evidence presented this evening.
Dan Pickney, regarding case 2162, 300 Banyan. I sent a FYI email to Ms. Mittner stating that the proposed building at 300 Banyan very much resembled in design and concept a building in Manhattan. And secondly, I received an invitation from the attorney from that case to discuss my previous comments, but I declined the invitation, and I can make my decisions based on the evidence presented.
Ken Breslauer, I received email communication regarding case 2167, 19-58A, and 2163. Otherwise, no ex parte communication.
Reg Stambaugh, I received communications on HPB 21-67, listened to a presentation by the architect on that, as well as 21-62 and 21-63, 301 Clematis and 300 Banyan Boulevard. But I believe that no doubt I can make my decision based on the evidence presented without bias. Thank you.
Thank you. We now enter the public comment portion of our meeting. If there is anyone who is here to speak about something that is not on the agenda this evening, now is the time to do so. Is there anyone here to make public comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the swearing in of our speakers. If you plan to speak or you think that you may speak, please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, I think 5 items, maybe 6 items on the consent agenda this evening. Can we please have a motion to approve?
I move the board to approve consent cases number 18-77C, case number 21-70, case number 21-75, case number 21-77, case number 21-73, case number 21-76.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. If you are 3101 Washington Road, 525 31st Street, 3115 Washington Road, 727 Palm Street, 210 Sunset Road, or 912 Division Avenue, your case has been approved. Thank you. We now move on to continued cases from our last meeting last month, beginning with case number 21-67, 3110 Washington Road.
Madam Chair, am I required to leave the chamber?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Harold Smith with Smith & Moore Architects here in West Palm Beach. With me this evening are Andrew Conchin and Ben Sachs of Workshop APD in New York, the design architects, and Corey Meyer with Navera Williams Design, the landscape architects for our project. We're here with a request to demolish an existing single-family residence located on 3110 Washington Road and replace it with a new contemporary modern home. The property is located in the Southland Park Prospect Park Historic District. 3110 Washington Road is immediately south of George Petty Park on the east side of Washington Road. It is marked by 3 large live oak trees in the front yard and several sable palms lining the property line adjacent to the park. The house to be demolished is a non-contributing structure. It's 4,950 square feet in area. It's a 2-story colonial-style residence identified by 4 white columns on the street facade and a brick first floor and horizontal wood siding on the second floor. The structure is entirely wood frame. It's in fair to poor condition, as evidenced by these photos. Its low floor elevation limits the amount of renovation work that could be performed on the property. Here are some aerial views. And the survey. The survey depicts the live oaks in the front yard, as you see, and also the line of mostly sable palms along the north property line adjacent to the park. We plan to preserve those elements of the site. As mentioned in the staff report, the proposal for demolition of this home does not meet any of the criteria of Historic Preservation Ordinance Article 5, Section 2D2 that might be cause to deny the request for demolition. That's my report, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Questions of the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we'll now move on to the presentation for new construction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Over there? Okay. Thank you for the reading. Again, for the record, Harold Smith with Smith & Moore Architects. For the past several months, I've had the pleasure of working with Andrew, Ben, and their award-winning team at Workshop APD in the design of a contemporary modern two-story home at 3110 Washington Road. I believe that the home that Andrew and his team have designed will be a jewel on the waterfront, complementing the David Lawrence designed modern home on the opposite side of George Petty Park. Oops. Okay. I would be surprised if everybody on the board is not familiar with this neighborhood. We have an eclectic mix of architectural styles that represent varying periods of the development of West Palm Beach, from Dutch colonial and Italianate across the street from us, to the early period of the Mediterranean revival movement of the 1920s and 30s, to the Art Deco and Art Moderne periods, to the Bermuda style that became popular in the post-war era. I believe that the home that we've designed will tell the story of today's modern architecture and take its place in the history of West Palm Beach as well. Again, our intent with this proposal will be to preserve the streetscape plantings, specifically the two large live oak trees nearest the sidewalk, and the line of mostly sable palms along the north property line that borders the park. As outlined in the staff report, this project is in compliance with standards 9 and 10 of the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. I'll turn this over to Andrew, who will walk you through the design of the proposed home.
Hello, I'm Andrew Kotchin from Workshop APD. I am just going to try to stretch this. I apologize, everything on the board is a little stretched, so hopefully we can walk through it. I'm going to skip ahead to the site plan just to give you a better sense of what Harold mentioned. Initially, when we were engaged to work with Harold and create this design, we were very focused to understand the context. I think whenever coming into an area and proposing a modern structure in a context that has a mixed history with a sort of varied range of homes, it's important to sort of break down that vernacular and understand it. From a master planning standpoint, we focused on, as Harold articulated, preserving the large trees along the streetscape here, while also preserving a lot of the palms that exist on the north side bordering the park, and additionally maintaining some of the screening on the south side as well. The geometry of the house, the intent was to really sort of create almost a series of pavilion-like elements that sort of segment the site to break down sort of a large vertical wall that would face the street or face the park. So and when we get to the renderings, you'll see there's a series of indoor-outdoor spaces that exist as you move through the site to the arrival court from the garage here on the west side, and then into the main living space in the body of the project, and then out towards sort of kitchen dining on the east side. And then there's a small cabana element further out with an outdoor space as well. I'll skip ahead to the renderings because I think those best describe the project and the materiality and the look and feel of the home. So this is the elevation that you see from Washington. Again, our concept was very much almost drawing from Art Deco architectural qualities with sort of shifted planes, shifted masses, again, to minimize the vertical impact of the structure. Additionally, we've integrated in a series of sort of textured plaster finishes. The home is painted plaster, not white, almost a sand beige tone to sort of, again, further integrate itself into the context and create a nice contrast against the lush greenery that will go in. We focus on highlighting corner elements and sort of interesting geometries to glazing to move away from a series of rhythmic elements that you would often see in sort of postmodern architecture and create something that felt a little bit more of a mid-century modern approach. You can see the arrival of the driveway court here and then the existing plant screening that exists on the north and south side. As we come around to the rear, the east side of the home, again, you get the sense of the sort of the space between the sort of cabana elements and the two-story elements with these sort of shifted planes that sort of rise up out of the ground floor area, both on the north and south side and the east and west as well. We've tried to break up very large expanses of glazing with some of these more solid elements to sort of create a more interesting and almost playful facade in the area. This is the straight-on view looking east out towards the water. You can see the way these plain elements with the textured plaster sit against the floor plates, breaking up that verticality that I mentioned before. The home is sort of broken into sort of three vertical elements. On the north, there's a mid element and then a southern element to again break that horizontal condition that you often see in some of the modern homes. It was just this continually playful approach to vertical and horizontal planes throughout. As you look at the aerial, we also took great care in sort of thinking about the master planning to preserve and not have sort of a large vertical wall where the playground is located in the park to not put that in shadow through much of the seasons, and sort of shift it so that we never were faced with too long of a horizontal plane as seen from either the north and south. I don't know, Corey, if you want to come and sort of talk through the landscape now, and then I'll jump back into the other photos.
Good evening, Corey Meyer with Navarro Williams Design. While we know we're not required to present landscape, we felt this house integrates so much into the landscape, we wanted to at least give you a quick overview of what all we have. So as Andrew and Harold both mentioned, we're fronting the park. The property line has quite a few sable palm trees, so we're actually going to pull a site wall in about 3 feet from our property line so that all of those palms can remain and not be touched and not be disturbed at the park. I'm just going to flip back to the front really quick. You can see those there. The front, as they mentioned before, there's 2 live oak trees that we're going to preserve. In order to do that, we have to keep the lawn pretty much flat at its current elevation. We are ramping the driveway up, which is a mix of a sort of a brick-sized stone and grass joint, about 4 inches and 4 inches, repeating pattern that ramps up to the motor court area, and then we have a low retaining wall across the front, which lets us keep this front yard lower and at level with the street. So your view basically today will be very similar to what you'll have once the house is complete. And in the back, we're really trying to create a sort of a green open space. There's a small dining courtyard under some sea grape trees, and then some coconuts flanking the pool. View from the water, we have some lawn steps that are kind of terracing down into the water to make sure we're taking full advantage of all the lawn and open space. But trying to keep it sort of a simple, clean palette to work well with the house and integrate the exterior and interiors as much as possible. I'll hand it back over to Andrew.
I know we're on the clock here, so I'll just skip ahead to a few other pieces of information. We've included a series of photos in our research working with Harold and his team of just understanding the context of a whole host of elements of interesting window configurations, slipped planes of massing over ground floor areas. Again, seen here, it doesn't matter what period the home is, there are similar architectural features that carry through each generation. Grouped ganged windows, highlighting corner elements, big pieces of glass set against smaller pieces of glass, much like we have, textured plaster conditions, again, large window frames set in, and then really sort of even these Art Deco elements. I think the house sort of really speaks to that transition from Art Deco and mid-century to sort of an architecture of today that will create, hopefully an interesting context down the road. This is a similar project. Although this is white, we are not proposing white, we're proposing a sand beige color, as I suggested before, but the way you get this sort of play on light through the textured plaster and the smooth plaster condition just done with a trowel is something that we think is really lovely and contributes to sort of the light play that exists on the home. And then here are the materials stretched across. There's some woods, obviously glass, and then some dark accents within the window frames. And that is it.
Thanks, Andrew. That's our presentation. We're open for any questions that you might have.
Questions of the applicant?
You know that there are three conditions recommended by staff. Did you read them? Can you comment on that?
Yes, I believe we addressed them. I know that one was the garage front, and I believe with the plantings that we've placed there and the fact that we have varying planes at that garage element, plus the texture of the stucco at the second floor, and that hedge in front of it, I believe that satisfies that concern. The color is going to be a sand beige, if you will, not a bright white. Let's see, was there a third
Clear
condition?
glass facing Washington Road.
Oh, clear glass, yes. We'll have clear glass facing Washington Road. Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course. Thank you.
Can we return to the rendering of the street-facing facade, please?
Mhm.
And Ms. White, do you have another blue packet? I don't know if you have them or Ms. Mittner, the additional criteria for new construction compatibility criteria. I didn't seem to get a packet for some reason, but I'd like to refer to those in reviewing this project. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Smith, in working on this project, did you review, and I'm sorry, I missed your name. Yes. Did you review the new construction compatibility standards?
Are those in addition to the Secretary of the Interior's
Yes.
standards? Oh,
Yes.
Well, I cannot say that we have, but I'll be happy to take a look at them as you are now.
Okay.
And see if we can address anything.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we did look at all these. Setting, orientation, setbacks, building name, design styles. Yes.
Yes, we did look at those. Sorry for that confusion.
Okay. And so I guess this statement is more of a larger critique of what's kind of happening on this portion of Washington Road, is that, you know, most of the buildings that are being constructed are going the same direction in terms of architectural style. And so what's resulting is more of a homogeneous looking streetscape than historically has been found. And that's one of my concerns, is that this is very, very, very similar to buildings in its immediate proximity. And I think that I appreciate that you have some references to features of historic buildings in the neighborhood, but it's still quite a departure from a lot of the homes. Specifically, what jumps out to me is the rhythm of solids to voids. You know, the placement of the glazing and the fenestration. And so I don't know how everybody else on the board feels. That just gives me pause. So, what were your, I guess, direct inspiration? What was your direct inspiration for this
Sure.
design?
I'll address your previous comment because I think it's a very fair comment that I think when we go in front of many different architectural review boards around the country, that same comment comes up. And I would implore the board to evaluate a modern home with the same set of criteria you do when you evaluate a home that is either hip roofs or gable roofs, right? When you see two hip roof structures next to each other, whether it's Mediterranean or some other sort of mixed Caribbean style, I don't think people sort of recognize them as the same house the way they do when two flat roof modern homes are put next to each other. We very much studied the house to the north of the park here, trying to make sure that we were creating something that was substantially different. When you look at that house, it is very clearly segmented into sections with windows that stack vertically throughout the home on every single facade. And that's one approach. Our approach that we took was very much about sort of staggering both the vertical planes of the architecture, as I said, rotating horizontal and vertical planes sticking out, breaking that vertical face, and creating a far more playful window configuration that flips around a corner. Not much different than looking at a Caribbean home or a Mediterranean home that has sort of windows and archways and flat archways. Those same level of distinctive criteria is how we sort of saw this home. Again, I think when I've spent 25 years coming to Southern Florida, and when I look at sort of the Art Deco structures that exist everywhere around in West Palm and in the surrounding area, that is really the point of departure as an inspiration, if you ask where it comes from. That there's a purity to those homes that I find very beautiful. There's a rhythm to them that's also very beautiful, and there's a shifting of planes and mass that you see in all of those other photos. So I think by default, the flat roof sort of screams to people as this is going to really stick out and look like the other home. But at the end of the day, I believe they'll look equally as dissimilar as if you put two bungalow-style homes next to one another, one built in the 40s and one built in the 50s with the different windows and different paint colors and things like that. So hopefully that helps sort of evaluate, level the playing field between the two homes and some of the other ones I think that are probably in front of this board.
To the point you just made, it would seem that maybe the differences you are describing between one building and another in this modern flat roof style are rather academic in nature, and perhaps the man on the street going by is going to immediately think flat roof. You raised that point yourself. The people in the neighborhood are sophisticated and so forth, but I think that, what Ms. Schuyler is saying, that your initial impression of it is, it's, just like the other ones down the block, there's no differentiation.
One other point that may or may not be relevant is this home is further set back from the street than the adjacent homes. Some of the newer homes that are being built there, just based on the site conditions, we've held this house back, I think, about 25 feet further. That hopefully it does minimize that vertical impact from the street.
Do we have any further questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you. We'll now go into the staff presentation.
Good evening, Frederique Mettner, City Historic Preservation Planner, presenting the request for the demolition and new construction at 3110 Washington Road per HPB case 21-67. As the applicant stated, you are very familiar with this neighborhood. This is the first lot south of Petty Park here, and it is indeed a non-contributing home to the district, and this is what's proposed to replace the existing structure. This is kind of a closer up, again, that brick faced bottom and the horizontal siding on the top. And there, these are the context photos of what's happening on either side. The park is under construction. And just a little further north, because it was referenced a minute ago, is that contemporary home that's going to is under construction north of the park. And as you can see in the images, this is, except for the projecting garage bay, is much more of a symmetrical design. Staff reviewed the criteria for demolition in our zoning and land development regulations, and we do not believe it meets any of these to deny the request for demolition. There would not be an irreparable loss to the Prospect Park / Southland Park Historic District, nor to the city of West Palm Beach. The applicant has already shown you the site plan. It has a generous setback of 59 feet to Washington Road. They are retaining the oak trees, as they've mentioned, and it does break up the linear path by having the bay here and then extending back towards there, and then the cabana. So all the views are really heading south and not into the park. The site plan with the landscaping introduced, some of the sections, the floor plans, and the elevations. You've already seen these renderings. This is from the Intercoastal Waterway. And the top one is from Washington Road. In reviewing the compatibility criteria in our code, staff appreciated that it was a lower structure. It was set back. It does have corner windows, which can be found in some of the homes on Monroe and some of the other homes actually just across the street. It does have a change in texture. One of the initial concerns was this blank wall. The applicant is addressing it through landscaping. The concern was also the tone, and they have committed to having the sand color, so it does blend better into the site and the sand that it goes into right here on the Intercoastal, as well as clear glass. So based on the applicable codes, as well as Secretary Interior Standards number 9 and 10, as far as new construction, we do believe it has met those criteria, and we are recommending approval with the 3 conditions that the applicant has actually already addressed. Again, the warmer tone, clear glass, and that the west elevation is addressed for that blank wall. So based on the revised application you saw this evening, we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Questions of staff? Could you please speak to my comment about the direction that this, just this one side of Washington Road is going in?
You're absolutely correct. It definitely has a proliferation of contemporary homes for those that are non-contributing and being replaced with new construction. You'll see later in your agenda the application for a project immediately to the south, which is not contemporary. I think you do have that spacing of the park, and I would agree if this was immediately next to another contemporary, I think it would be inappropriate. However, West Palm Beach in the 20s boom had lots of Mediterranean revival. In the post-World War II, we had lots of post-war ranch homes, and no one said, oh, there's too many or there's 2 in a row. Because there's not 2 immediately next to each other, I think it's appropriate. I think the massing and the thoughtful design on this one, it's just not as overwhelming as the other contemporary structures that are being built, and I think it's actually more in keeping with the neighborhood than the other ones.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions of staff? Do we have any public comment on this case? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session.
No, we have nothing against contemporary design per se. I think it's a very attractive building. I think it is very well designed. But sort of as a rhetorical question, I would, in light of Ms. Mittner's comments, would you be satisfied that what she said is, would satisfy your concern? That's all.
I think the justifications provided by Ms. Mittner and the architect were satisfactory. I think, I do think it's a thoughtful design, and I appreciate the effort that you put into it. And of course, I very much respect staff's opinion, and so I think that her point is well taken. This is the period of this type of architecture right now, which that doesn't mean that it's not compatible, and that doesn't mean that I personally don't like it. I just want to always keep that in mind, that I think one of the things that is so special about our historic districts, especially in South Florida, is that they're not planned developments, that, there's diversity and range in the architecture. And I think that's something that we want to be protective of when we're looking at plans for new construction. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's a very well-designed home. And I agree with Ms. Mittner's comments also, so satisfied.
Okay. Any further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion? And we will need 2 motions, one for demolition and one for new construction.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 2167 for demolition in accordance with the demolition guidelines as set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application 2167 for new construction in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, specifically standards 9 and 10, as well as the additional compatibility criteria set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance and the Historic Preservation element of the Comprehensive Plan of the City of West Palm Beach and Secretary of Interior Standards 9 and 10, and the additional compatibility criteria set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. Specifically, the conditions include: 1, the permanent materials selected on the exterior shall exhibit a warmer tone, such as the light rose or tan depicted in the rendering versus the harsh white shown on the material selection page. 2, the glass facing Washington Road shall be clear. And 3, the west elevation shall be modified to address the blank wall of the side-loading garage.
Please a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, your project's been approved. Thank you. And thank you for your forgiveness for last meeting. Moving on to case number 19-58A, 227 Rugby Road.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Daniel Clavijo with SK Architect and Planner. Patrick Seagraves is also available. There he is. And the owners are tuning in via the live video stream. They're available by phone if necessary. As you know, they were having a baby and they're taking care of her. So, but hopefully we can answer your questions from the previous meeting. We had come here in July. We deferred in August, and now we're back in September just to answer a few of the questions regarding the, I guess, the maintenance of the house, how we're improving it, and the windows, which was the main focus of our application for our client. So again, just going through, you see the contextual site plan, the photos. This is the area in question regarding the windows that had to be removed because of rot. Again, the client sends their deepest apologies for having removed it without properly notifying staff and the building department prior to doing so. We have a window sample which is in the back, and we can bring it closer in a second. We also have photographs as well as a full window schedule to show everybody how we're maintaining it in the same style, dimensions, and everything in terms of the windows. So you can see here. Again, this was what we previously proposed in terms of windows. Our application itself concerns this area where I'm hovering my hand for this bedroom on the second floor. What we had shown in July was we were requesting to remove a bay of 3 windows to separate them into 2 individual windows. As you can see, that was this option over here where we'd have 2 windows essentially in this bedroom. Looking back at that, we modified that to instead switch the 3 windows with the 1 window. So as you can see, before or existing, there were 3 windows and the 1 window. And now we're proposing to, keep that same bay style, the 3 windows, and swap it over with the one over here, which is in that same location. It's just, again, flipped. These other window modifications had been previously approved by staff. There's also a minor modification that we got news of in between meetings, which here for the cabana, that to remove these 2 windows here, just in terms of space. I have a photo of the stucco that remains on the chimney of the house, which again, this has been preserved so we can have the same application to the rest of the house where it was removed. Again, the client absolutely loves the house, the historic nature of the house. They're completely dedicated to making it look exactly as it was before in the area of its existence. This is a photograph of the window, which again, I have the sample in the back and I can bring it up to you guys in just a second. You can see it's a Sierra Pacific window, which we had been approved when we came before the commission right before the pandemic, essentially. And the only difference with, it'll be white to be comparable with what was there before. But you can see here from the inside, from the side. And we have here all the shop drawings. I'm just going to run through these a little bit quickly so I can get to the main part, which is here you can see this, for example, item of 5 windows is for the living room, which is here. Here you can only see 4 just because of the angle, but here you can see the 5 windows. So as you can see, they are the same. They have the same, they measured carefully the openings to make sure they were the same. So it's going to be exactly the same. The profiles, same light pattern, same mutton pattern. Everything in that instance is the same. Here you can see from the inside. Other photographs just so that you can also know that, obviously we were approved for in other areas, we're removing the windows and replacing them. So in that same manner, they were or they are being just as careful to replicate it in the same format. Here you can see that bay of 3 in the rear, which again we're proposing to flip. And you can see here, this is the bay of 3, which again, same format that we're keeping. And if I just run through the rest, this was what we had previously gotten approval for back in December, just as a point of reference. Which again, you can see this was the existing house as it was before. This was our proposal. And again, our same proposal is to keep this style and the windows. Just again, unfortunately, they had to be removed, and unfortunately, they didn't tell anyone. Again, deepest regrets. Here you can see the 3 on the back, which again, same style, same everything. That would essentially conclude the presentation. Any comments or questions that you have, more than happy to answer them. And I'm going to bring the window close by just so that you can have a point of reference.
I may say one thing. This was the window that was approved previously, so all the windows would match, and the Sierra Pacific window was the one that was historically approved earlier, which is a wood-clad window.
We really appreciate you bringing in a sample. It's always very helpful to see it in person. Do you have any questions of the applicant?
Yes, so the north elevation, subject of this issue with the 3 windows, that is the rear elevation of the house?
It is, yes.
And it's visible from where?
It is not, it's only visible from the rear. You'll never see it from the street. Let me just go back. Okay, so this is Rugby Road, the front of the house. This is South Olive Avenue, and the area in question is right over here, below this hip where I'm rotating my hand. So all this area, you drive down, well, obviously if you're driving north, you don't see it. Driving south, you also won't see it because there is a very large tree which the homeowner has maintained in this area. So, and I believe they moved it to accommodate the addition, but they've maintained it to make sure that, you know, it's historic to the, well, it's not historic to the property, but they loved it and they want to keep it in the same manner of being representative to the historic nature of the property. But it'll never be seen. There's this angle to the house where it would obstruct it from that view of sight anyway, so it would only be visible to people here in the backyard.
And the reason for this movement of windows is to accommodate the interior of the house, not the exterior. Is that correct?
It is correct. You can see here, if we maintain the 3 bay, part of it would be obstructive in the closet and then off-center in the bedroom. So our previous proposal had been remove one of the windows and just have them on either side of the bedroom. But after a little bit more consideration, we thought, well, since it's 3 and 1 in its original nature, let's just flip it to be 1 and 3.
I'm asking these questions because it bothers me a little bit the fact that the new 3 windows are located in a relationship to the hip roof above in a weird position, right? Don't you think so? The middle, you know, there is a hip roof above these windows.
Yes.
And there is an overhang, you know, that is biting on that middle window. So
Ordinarily, and for the most part, I would agree with you. The reason that it's a little bit different in this case is because even though each of these areas do have that hip area of the roof, and there's this portion here, this wall itself is completely flush. There's no jog in it. So I understand from the site perspective, maybe it might look a little bit different, but if I go back to, for example, the photographs here, for example, this is the entire wall in question across these different photographs, and it is really not noticeable at all. If you weren't standing directly below it, you wouldn't notice that there is that divergence there, especially now that we're going to have a loggia going across there. It's undiscernible, I would say, but I do understand your point, and thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Mittner?
Frederique Mittner, presenting case 19-58A, because it's an alteration to the original approval for 227 Rugby Road. As you know, the subject property is a contributing structure in the Prospect Park / Southland Park Historic District on a corner lot on the northeast corner of Rugby Road and South Olive Avenue, very visible as you travel. This was the image of the structure when it first came before the board in December of 2019. And as you know, that unfortunately there has been a significant loss of historic materials through the construction process. The applicant is here this evening for two modifications to the previous approval, and that is the shift in windows, as the applicant just stated, going from a paired window to 3 pairs of windows, and then again, just reversing that, as well as a modification to the south elevation of the pair of the paired structure to the original pool house. So this structure was there. This is new construction that was approved by the board, and they want to eliminate the windows there. So that's not a loss of a historic material. Both of these face each other into the interior of the backyard, and they would not be visible from any public right-of-way. And staff believes that those modifications are acceptable. However, the greater concern is the loss of historic materials, and we're addressing that through the code enforcement process separately. But this evening, we are recommending these are the windows, and additionally, the windows that are lost, of course, have to be replaced. And so the applicant would like to replace them with the previously approved product on the front facade. You've seen the actual window sample in the images. They would be the same configuration as what was there previously, as well as the sill. These were images that were supplied, and so we are recommending approval of the modifications of the rear-facing windows and utilizing this new product in place of the ones that have been lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
I'm just curious, how does that process work with code enforcement?
So they're cited for irreparable loss, and then they come in front of the special magistrate, and it's a Florida state statute. It depends on what the magistrate rules, but in the past, it's been approximately $30,000.
Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. I think this comment card is for a different case. I was just making sure it wasn't for this one. Do we have any public comment?
I put the wrong number down here.
Okay, but you did mean for this?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pullum.
I just want to say a thank you to the staff and to the board for taking quite seriously damage that's been done to a historic structure. I was troubled at the last meeting that it was kind of passed off as it was the responsibility of the inspector to catch the issues. And I'm hoping that it's a good lesson for all of us that historic preservation does not mean historic replication going forward. Because otherwise, I can see this happening again and again. And this is an architecture firm and builder who do work on the island. They do work in other locales. Maybe they haven't had the experience of working on historic structures, but I kind of doubt it. And so I think it's appropriate, A, that there's a little more humility shown, and B, that there is a consequence. Because as I said, replication can be done from the ground up. Restoration, once it's destroyed, you've lost an element of that historic structure, which is the whole nature of preservation in our city. So thank you for your attention to that, and hopefully we can send a stronger message when applications occur that this is not okay. And there will be, a kind of an arched eyebrow looked at in looking at these projects and resolving them. So thank you for your dedication and good intentions as it's directed at historic properties and restoration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comment? Seeing none, I will offer the applicant a rebuttal if you would like it.
Again, thank you, commissioners, and thank you for Frederic. Thank you, public comment. Thank you, everybody, for bringing it to the attention. As I said at the last meeting, and I said this time, again, it is a very unfortunate instance. On behalf of the owners and behalf of us, we're giving our profoundest apologies for what happened. Again, in terms of architecture, we always strive to maintain the charm, beauty of the house, especially with the historic nature. This was not my call for removing the windows. We didn't know about it. We're not shifting the blame on anyone. It is what it is, and we gravely apologize for what happened, looking that it won't happen again, and we're providing what we think is the best solution for the property. And these owners this is going to be their home for their family, and they care deeply about the historic nature. They wanted to keep the windows as much as possible, and they should have notified it in proper order. They apologize that they didn't, and we do the same. So thank you for listening to us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your heartfelt apology. It's appreciated. And I think to you and to everyone in the audience and anyone watching, just an open line of communication is so important with all of these projects. We want these properties to be restored. We want them to be successful. And so inevitably with any historic property, there are challenges that arise during construction. And Ms. Mittner and the board is always very willing to work to find a favorable solution. So communication is key. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
With that, we will go into executive session. Would someone like to make a motion unless there's any further discussion?
I can make a motion. I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 19-58A and 227 Rugby Road for alterations in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49 of the City Zoning and Land Development Regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries, case approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Please note case numbers 2157, 2158, 2159, which are 3120 Washington Road, 3130 Washington Road, and 3140 Washington Road have been withdrawn. We now move on to case number 21-62 and 21-63, 301 Clematis Street and 300 Banyan Boulevard.
Madam Chair, just for the audience sake, there is another case on the agenda later on for 3120 Washington. It was that just the previous submittal has been withdrawn.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So those are, the new case numbers are 21-78 and 21-79. So those will be the last two cases heard this evening.
Good evening, Keith Spina with Spina O'Rourke, and nice to be back. I was here last month and we presented this project. We got some great comments. We've been working again with Frederique and Anna Maria to address the comments, and like to share with you today what we've come up with. Again, the project is 300 Banyan and 301 Clematis. The 301 Clematis is the building that's, the start of this preservation application. It's an interesting project in that we're talking about an ad valorem that incorporates historic preservation and moves it and includes some new construction. What we always like to do is when we're at a historic preservation board meeting, we want to make sure that everybody understands that what we're talking about today is preservation, and we're really excited. We think this could be a great opportunity to really up the incentive for the development community to treat preservation as a top priority. So we're excited to present the project. We were here again on the August 24th meeting. Today, we think that staff is recommending approval with only one condition, which is that we comply with the DAC and PPRC, and we will. We anticipate doing both of those. We have to go to, we're in the middle of PPRC. We have been tentatively agreed that we will be proceeding to the next DAC as long as everything works out perfectly, and then we'll be presenting at DAC, and we anticipate approval there. There are two parts of the project that we presented last month that we wanted to make sure we talked about it again, and the first is the window pattern at 301 Clematis shall match the original, and we talked about exactly and preferably utilizing same manufacturer. So that'd be the first one. This is one of our favorite images. It's a 1936-41 Volk renovation of the building that converted it to the Hatches department store. It gave it the great art moderne style, and it's still what the building looks like today. And we have agreed to match the window pattern exactly like this original image. The ground floor is a little different in that it's not a single entrance to a department store and show windows. It's a variety of multi-tenanted configuration, but we are going to match the window configuration in the new building. These are existing elevations above each of the proposed, and that configuration does match. This is a more enlarged version of it. I'll go, if you have any questions, happy to. And then we talked a little bit last month about metal windows, and then we talked about steel versus aluminum. A lot of the windows in the building today are aluminum, and what we wanted to do is we think the importance of matching the metal window is the profile of the frame. And so we showed a comparison of the first drawing was a Volk drawing. The next was a Hope profile window, as you could buy a Hope steel window today. And then the next couple were other metal windows made of aluminum that we feel are great examples. We do have the True Light frame here as a sample that I can show you in a minute. And then, so we are proposing to do that, and we think we have staff support on that. The other part of it, just as a reference point, is the realities of the market when renovating any building, whether it's preservation or new, is at some point, budget does have an impact. We had our window manufacturer give us an analysis of replacing the windows with new metal windows in 301 Clematis and replacing them with an alternate, which was the Hope steel. and I don't know if you can see those numbers, but we're a little bit over and a little bit under on the metal aluminum windows, around $600,000, and the new window was a little bit over 1.2 million. So it's a 2x, but it's a really significant number, and that it's in excess of $600,000 just to go from metal aluminum to metal steel. The other factor that was really critically important today is that the delivery time on a steel window today in this market is about 50 to 52 weeks. The aluminum are about 8 to 16. And we anticipate being done with construction in way less than 52 weeks. So it was a really, it's an important reality, but we wanted to, just share that as a piece of information. If it's okay, I'll show the window frame real quick. On the glass, we do anticipate putting clear glass on the ground floor of the buildings, and we anticipate doing a lightish grayish tinted film on the upper windows. We have a bunch of glass samples as well. What we'd love to do is work with Frederic on exactly the glass sample, but we brought a bunch of glass samples, and I can give you the 1, 2, 3 of glass. They're really hard to see when you're holding a little 1 foot square piece of glass, but we have them here, and I'm happy to show you what they are. Some of these have a gray tint, some have low E, and of course the one is a clear piece of glass that we're going to use on the ground floor. So
I'd like to see the frame sample, but I'm okay with staff selecting any. Are you interested in seeing that?
I mean, I think that the profile of the aluminum is very close to the steel, and given the difference in cost and lead time, I wouldn't have an objection to use the aluminum one. But
I agree.
if the board wants to see it, I'm open to see it.
So that's the frame, and it shows a really thin profile of the frame that is very similar to what's out there today in the building. And then I'll show you one piece of glass. If you want to see more, I can, but this is a clear piece of laminated glass. And hard to see anything when you're looking at a piece of glass with me standing behind it, nobody standing behind it. I think it's all really clear to preservation that we want clear glass on the first floor, and we agree. We think that Frederic has, in my opinion, become kind of an expert on glass, and we think that we can satisfy exactly the thoughts that she has. But we've debated low E film because of green. We've talked about low and mid iron glass, all things that we've considered, which takes away the green a little bit, is what happens when you start to adjust the iron in a piece of glass. All of them will be laminated, so they meet the hurricane impact codes, but that's kind of where we are. So I'll continue. The next part was a little bit more interesting part of the discussion last month, and it was the ad valorem tax exemption program shall only be applicable to the 301 Clematis Street project if the 300 building is redesigned to have more elements and lines that relate to the existing structure. And it talked about floor levels and materials. So this was, it was a fun exercise. We spent an enormous amount of time redesigning the building. We had a couple meetings with both Frederic and Anna Maria because we love meeting with those guys. They have great input. And I think, it was also one of the members, I think Mr. Pitchney, made an interesting comment last month that at first kind of, I somewhat dismissed it, but when we went back and started thinking about it, we'll talk a little bit about the curved part of the 301, but it kind of grew on us. So thank you for the comment. We think that with the comments that we heard at the board last month and working with staff, we're really excited about the integration of the design between the two buildings and not replicating a historic style on a completely different scale and shape of a building, but taking something that really relates and compatible, and you can see, we think, the relationship of the preservation component and how we have this respectful design that integrates the two buildings, yet the new architecture is unique and interesting, and it needs to be a super Class A office building. That's what we're designing. So this is, we always like to remind everybody of the site, which is the 300 Banyan, which is one of the best corners in all of downtown West Palm Beach. We're extra sensitive to that because our office stares out our front door at it. But when we see one of these prime corners and it's a parking lot with a bunch of cars, We love that, we have a client that's talking about redeveloping it, and we think it's going to be an incredible improvement to downtown. We think it's going to continue to stretch the energy from Clematis further north, and so we're really excited about the project. So again, just real briefly, this is the property. We have Clematis Street on the bottom of the page. We have the 301 Clematis building. We have the alleyway in between, and then we have the 300 Banyan property to the north. So the north side is Banyan, and then you hit Wells Fargo, the Oversea or Flagler Banyan Square, the city's Banyan Garage. But I think everybody's a block away. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the site. I'm hitting the button, I swear. Have a little help here. Can you scroll? Okay, yeah. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, did I get you too far?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so thank you. So we went through the real. Sorry about this. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can get it. All right, so this is the east elevation of the two buildings, 301 Clematis on the left and 300 Banyan on the right. And we think this is probably the part of the design exercise that we really focused on. There's a very strong pattern to the 301 building. One of the items that we talked about last month, we've been talking about a lot internally with our design, exercise and also with staff, is that there's a very strong cornice treatment on the 301 building above the second floor. And it's a horizontal band. It's has an interesting and unique shape profile to it. And it takes, on the bottom half, 2 floors of the building, the pilasters go up and die into this cornice. When we reviewed this with staff and as well as last month, we thought that everybody felt that we could do a better job expressing the relationship at that cornice level. So we've adjusted the design of the 301 or 300 Banyan building so that that cornice continues exactly in alignment with the upper part of the second floor. The part that we think is really interesting about this is, although this is a great elevation showing the two buildings, because of its location in downtown West Palm Beach, it's really hard to get a perspective that shows the buildings like this. But we do think it's a really prominent perception of the building, almost as you walk around the Clematis and the Olive side, that you see a very prominent cornice in the 2 floors below it, and then you start to see a little bit of the 3rd floor, disappear as it goes up on the 301. So we love the way that works. You can also see the pilasters highlighted with a little red center line are a very prominent facade pattern. And we took that pattern, we didn't copy pilasters over on to the Banyan building, but we took that rhythm and expressed it in the 300 building. And again, we like that. One of the things I'll show you in a second, though, is there is that great curved entrance at the corner of Olive and Clematis. And we tried to work and see how we could express that in the new design. I wanted to bring up some inspiration that we had used originally. One of the things when designing buildings in downtown is starting to recognize how to deal with a garage treatment. We, from the very beginning, had some inspiration, the 1111 Lincoln Garage, which everybody's familiar with, but some other examples of that. And we wanted an artistic treatment that showed great architecture, but it's complicated when you get into certain parts of downtown to get a parking garage to work with the liner. So we this was our inspiration from day one. When we came back last month, we'd kind of lost sight of that, and I think staff had shared that pretty clearly, and they made some reference to some garages around town. And when we left again, we studied it, we listened to the comment, we thought about it, and we agreed. So we've gone and we've really gotten back to our true inspiration for the expression of the garage slabs. So we have the cornice that runs across both buildings, and then all of a sudden you see where we've taken that curved element, not replicated it so the whole building's curved, but we started to treat the corner with that cornice in a curved shape that is representative and associated with the 301 building. And then as we started to progress up the building, we wanted to transition back to a pretty geometric corner on the architecture. And we love the way that it happens. And, so all of those were great comments. Some of the other things is the materials that we will be using will be shared with both buildings. The glass on the first floor of the 300 Banyan will be clear glass. As we go up, it will be a grayish tinted glass. And but we are excited about the way that the design, with staff's help, with your help, and with us, rethinking everything about the building based on the comments, and we're excited about it. This is another view from Clematis. You can start to see the cornice that really, brings at a pedestrian and vehicular scale that correlation. There's a picture, a view looking kind of southwest at the corner of the 301, but it also shows the open space. It shows how we've taken the materials and the design elements and, tied the two buildings together with that as well. One of the things that, sometimes when we talk about this, we talk about architecture, but from an operational standpoint, we're also doing some pretty significant things that work great for the projects together. Our F&B operation, meaning our, probably a great restaurant that we have planned in the first floor of 301 to activate the alleyway in the Olive Avenue. Our seating for it is actually across the alleyway in an open area that is in the other, in the 300. So if you say, how do you integrate the two pieces of property? Well, half the business is on the other side of the alley. We think of the alleyway, the way the city has started to, as a great active space, as long as a trash truck isn't there. But other than that, that's going to be a really important part of both of these buildings in our project. This is another view, kind of more at a pedestrian scale, showing, again, we think this curved element is really unique and interesting, but completely relatable back to the 301. And whoops. And, materials, I think we've talked about that, and that's all we had. If there are any other comments or, any of the history that we talked about, we have it here if anybody needs a refresher. But that's all we have.
Questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. I think it's a fantastic project. Great job.
Thank you.
Yes, I feel as well that you resolved the comments that I had made.
Thanks.
There were two issues I know that you probably could expand a little bit. One was about the pilaster on the east facade that was missing, and you explained to us why. The other one was related to the signage of the building. So if you can expand on that, please.
So I'll go to the easy one first. The pilaster, after working with staff and really talking this thing through, the original design configuration of the building was actually, there was a building, the southern 3/4, and then there was another building on the northern part. And there's also a pretty prominent element, which is the balconies that you see, which is a stair in the building. And we feel that the break in the two buildings, by removing the one pilaster to really create a major entrance into our building, was the right way, in our opinion, to treat the design. We feel confident that it was a good idea because somehow the comment, and I'll let Frederique speak to this on her own, but the comment has seemed to have gone away. And we think it's a really good design. Another really important part of that decision was that we took, right now if you go to the building, there's a main entrance to the office portion, second and third floors on Clematis. We think Clematis needs to be a retail, highly activated, central part of our entertainment district. We don't think an empty office building lobby, empty a lot of times during the day because it's a pretty small lobby, building, and then completely empty at night because at some point people go home or go out. And so we wanted to shift that around to Olive, and when we did, we wanted to still give it, the expression that it needed as a main entrance to a prominent Class A office building on Clematis. And so that's kind of all of the pieces that led up to us suggesting eliminating the one pilaster that was right here at this spot. And we hope that you guys would agree with that. The Hatches sign, a little bit more complicated. We have, two things that we've done to talk about the Hatches sign. We agree with Frederic and that it was a Hatches department store. It was a pretty significant renovation, but in the life of the building, let's call it 100 years, the Hatches sign was up for 10 years. It was a Burdines, it was a Belk's, it was a bunch of other things along the way. So, we started to think about it. Then, we have Meredith Lee from Harvey's office did this incredible job. You guys saw it last month on researching the history of this building. We started to find some really interesting things and associated with the history that today we don't necessarily think are things that we want to associate buildings with. Some of it had to do with the Confederacy and slaves, and we aren't positive that the Hatches family had anything to do with that, but we're a little unclear. And to find out after we've renamed the building Hatches just because of a sign, and we find that out in a couple of years, that would be, pretty unfortunate. In addition to that, we also think that attracting, world-class retail tenants to the first floor of this building, signage is important. And to have a distraction of, well, can you get that sign out of the way? Like, I want people to come to my retail establishment and they keep looking and saying, I see the Hatches. And so we, and at some point we think that, more signs didn't give any value. It's interesting for me to say it, when our old office building, we got approved one of the largest signs to, recall out the Hopkins Marine Hardware Company building. It's a 100-foot long sign. But in this case, we thought it wasn't a requirement. And, I'll let Frederic address it specifically, but we think she may have agreed because the comment has gone away as a condition of approval. So,
Thank you.
sorry for the long answers.
Any further questions of the applicant?
Madam Chairwoman, I just want to address that another condition would be recording a unity of title for both of these. I don't know if that's something for you to address or for Mr. Oyer to address.
We have been in discussions with city staff and understand that and agree.
Very good, thank you.
For the ad valorem, yes, we understand that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Mittner?
The first presentation of Frederic Mettner, City Historic Preservation Planner, case 21-62301 Clematis Street, Hatches Department Store. That wasn't really addressed this evening. I just want to quickly just walk through that. It would include the entire site because they are seeking an ad valorem for that second component. And the request is to designate the building as a historic site based on its current design from 1936 and its association with John L. Boak. You've heard the testimony last time. There has really been no change on its historical significance. And so we continue to support the designation. But while we have one of these historic elevations up, you can see that the building did end here, and there were no pilasters on the east elevation. And that's why that comment has been removed for the new proposal, because it actually wasn't historically there. It was an applied pilaster when the building was expanded and not of its historic significance. So we continue to believe it merits designation with the findings of fact in your packet for designating the site as historic. Then for the second component of the request, case 2163 for the ad valorem request, the applicant has already summarized what is in front of you today, and that is seeking an ad valorem tax exemption for the increase in improvement value on both the 301 Clematis site, this building, based on the improvements they're going to do, and the new construction here. You've seen the site plan, and it's actually quite a small footprint on the Banyan site. The existing elevations and the new north elevations, the applicant has addressed staff's condition of the fenestration pattern and we are in agreement that the aluminum frame is comparable to the original steel window. This is some of the modifications they've made that the applicant has already reviewed. Is the stone base color has improved to match what we are seeing in the historic drawings. The cornice line aligns, the volume of spaces aligns, and even the massing of the base part of the new building is in keeping with the historic one. And this portion of the above almost floats above. And so you see the relationship, and in straight on elevation, these do align well. And you have these voids, so really you let this clematis and olive building kind of pop out. And so you let the historic building is really the one that is prominent, and therefore, even though the newer building is taller, we do believe it meets the standards for Secretary Interior standards for compatibility, yet certainly differentiated. It's probably one of the most artistic buildings we have downtown. And again, the compatibility in terms of the cornice line, the materials, the color, and adding that cornered element. So we do believe it meets the Secretary Interior standards. However, we do have 3 conditions. They've already been stated: that all DAC and PPRC conditions shall be met, that the property shall have a unity of title, and then, as is typical procedure, but just as a reminder of how this process works, that the ad valorem tax exemption program is subject to final approval via completed work application to this board, which is what we always do, which you saw on the consent agenda tonight for a Washington Road case, and then it goes to City Commission and Board of County Commission, and that's our typical process. So you will see this case again at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
I'm just curious, Ms. Misner, is the public space, is that something that's new to West Palm Beach? I'm just trying to visualize the city in it.
I'm sorry, the public space?
The public space like that, but,
Yes, I'm not aware of another project that has that.
Yeah.
This space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would probably see some of that, especially as it starts to get built out more over at 360 Rosemary Tower. I think it's a great example of it. They're going to activate
Oh, no,
that.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I've seen it in
And,
other cities, and I just asked her whether this is, something new for the city.
Yeah, the Ben
in a
Hotel.
positive way.
Yeah, it's exciting. We think it does a great job with the activation of the, yeah.
Okay.
Another example is the Broadstone project downtown.
Okay.
And that's incentivized, right? They receive.
It's a public-private partnership, correct?
Right.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. We have one public comment. Ms. Pullum?
Thank you. Nancy Pullum. I asked at the last meeting, and I'm going to ask again. I need, for the layperson, an explanation of how you grant unity of title over a public easement. And the reason I ask is, what's to stop someone who has a house on one side of the street from deciding to put a pool, let's say Grandview or some smaller streets and neighborhood, and wants an ad valorem on a structure that's put on a vacant lot? I don't know how you establish a basis for an ad valorem tax exemption on an asphalt flat parking lot. So are we suggesting that the owner will get a forgiveness for the increased value from that parking lot for 10 years once that building is completed? Every time I read the code and I queried people, there was a lot of doubt. And I know Denise Hare, sitting as the city attorney at the last meeting, said, you can't do that. And everything just rolled right along, and nobody said, what do you mean, Mrs. Hare? And I don't think there's really been, other than we're going to do some witchcraft and magic in the back room, how this has been given reasonable attention and explanation. And not only are we putting ourselves on the line to grant an ad valorem on a parking lot that's been a parking lot forever, practically, but setting a precedent for the future. And it goes on your word to the city commission, and then on to the county commission. And I think it's an erosion of the code. And it doesn't matter what I think if somebody can give us a reasonable explanation of how exactly we can accomplish this. I know someone right now who owns a property who wants to replat it. There is an easement through it, and they're having great difficulty. Well, at this rate, you know, why wouldn't that individual come back and say, well, you did it down there, why can't you do it for me? And there's been no discussion other than, oh yeah, we got to work it out, and everything keeps getting thrown to DAC. Do we have city staff recommending things that legally nobody seems to give an explanation of how this is accomplished? So that's my concern. Hats off to the restoration of the Hatch building. Hats off to adjustments to the design that certainly make that new building much more palatable. But there's a real screw loose in this whole thing that I have yet to hear a public explanation about. So thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to provide a rebuttal?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will go into executive session.
I think that the question subject of the public comment was clear, and the city has ruled that the proposal is perfectly legal. So that is my understanding.
I agree that we have to seek our direction from the city attorney. However, I do think there is language, within our motion, if we decide to pass it, that to approve the project, that this is subject to approval by the city commission and the county commission. So this is just one stop in a very long way to approval. But I think for our purposes, when it comes to legal interpretation, we have to defer to the city attorney. And is there anything that you would like to add to address public comment?
Thank you. Just very briefly, there does not appear to be anything in the code which prohibits or prevents, a tax exemption application due to an alley running through a property. And that's my brief response.
Okay.
So, other than that, just the, like you said, the conditions, especially the unity of title, in addition to the other conditions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion?
It's my opinion that the applicant addressed all our concerns from last month, and I think that this is going to be a great project for the city.
I appreciate the efforts that the applicant made to meet staff's conditions and the quick turnaround. I think it's wonderful to see this building restored. Putting on my other hat as the head of the Preservation Foundation of Palm Beach, knowing that such an important work by the architect John Volk is going to now be designated where it currently isn't, is certainly a very strong incentive, I think, for this board to approve this case and look favorably upon it. There's a lot of our buildings downtown that make up Clematis Street and that area as we know it that are not designated. And I think it would drastically change the streetscape and certainly the architectural heritage of the city to have those buildings lost. Not that there's a threat of demolition here, but I do think that it's great that we have an incentive that's encouraging the designation and restoration of this building. So with that, would someone like to make a motion?
I'm going to try this.
First is the historic one, designation of the first project.
Right, okay.
So there should be, I think, is it findings of fact, I think, that are,
Is this finding of facts?
so if you go to the case,
Well, maybe I won't. Don't I just read this for the first?
That is for the second part of the project.
so for the designation, do you want to, Gabe, do you want to do the designation and then
Designation.
Sorry,
you
I
can?
tried.
The subject site is historically significant, and the structure on site was constructed in 1936 or over 85 years ago. 2, the subject site is associated with the commercial development of West Palm Beach. 3, the subject site is associated with the architect John L. Volk. 4, the structure embodies the distinctive characteristics of the Art Modern style of architecture. 5, the loss of the subject building to the city would be significant.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve. Move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 21-62, 301 Clematis Street for alterations and ad valorem in accordance with standard 9 and 10 as set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance number 3554-02. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence.
This is actually case 63.
63?
No,
You ref-
62.
If you refer to the screen in front of you.
Those conditions
Oh.
are on the screen.
So if you want to amend your motion, I think to,
So I have two motions, right? I have 62 and 63, no?
62
So-
I just did.
he just did 62.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes,
I'm
so you're
sorry.
doing
63.
63. So if you want to amend it to correct the case number and then add the conditions.
Okay, so, sorry, apologize. Correct, case number is 21-63. And the conditions I have 1, all DAC and PPRC conditions shall be met. Although I saw 3, here we go, sorry. The properties at 301 Clematis Street and 300 Banyan Boulevard shall have unity of title. The ad valorem tax exemption program shall be subject to final approval via submittal of the completed work application to the Historic Preservation Board, City Commission approval, and Board of County Commission approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Geez, I picked a confusing one.
You picked a tough one. But now it can only get easier from here. I know we have quite a few members of the public. Ms. Minter, do you think, for this next case, do you think this might be a good time to take a quick 5-minute break? Or do you think we should wait till after that case? Oh, wait, no, sorry. I'm sorry. After 2164, we'll take a quick break.
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving on to case number 2164, 806 Park Place, and then we will take a brief 5-minute break before we hit 2168, which is 2415 South Flagler.
Thank you and good evening. We were here last month, and here we are again. My name is Steve Knight, and I'm with Alexis Knight Architects, and I am representing the owner, Ellie Ramia, and the applicant, Samuel Bauer. Specifically, we're looking at the property located at 806 Park Place. As you may remember, there's substantial work that was completed at this residence without the benefit of proper approvals. And we're going to go through that again and take a second pass at trying to satisfy some of the requests that were presented or suggested that we contend with. This is a photograph of the home, the best we can tell, before the renovations were completed. The Bahama shutters were removed. Some of the windows were modified. The exterior stucco was revamped. There's a closer shot at the front door that was reworked. Some of the exterior window sills were modified. Some of those we discussed last time, and we're going to talk specifically about what we're going to do to try to bring this home back to the original, or at least close to the original character prior to reconstruction. This is the work that has been completed up to this point. As you can see, in some cases it does look quite different, but we've got a sound strategy for trying to get this back similar to the way it was prior to this work. There's some additional illustrations. And here are some graphics that show what our intentions are. Specifically, we'll go through each one of these line items. Many of these were presented by you last time. We found them sound, and we will incorporate those into the revisions. Specifically, as you can see on the previous photograph, there is a wood trellis that was added to the front. Some of the windows were changed as far as size. In many cases, in fact, most all the cases on the north-facing side of the building, the window openings were maintained as is. The two larger windows on the front and the window flanking directly to the left of the front door on the north side had been modified, and we are going to suggest that we take those back to the original configuration. So in listing them specifically, as far as what we plan on doing, we are going to remove the wood trellis that was added to the front entrance. The Bahama shutters that are currently installed on the two front windows will be removed. We will install new window sills to match the original architecture and design on all of the north-facing windows. And we will rework and bring back to the original configuration the windows on the north-facing side of the existing structure. We will rework to decrease the one front window, specifically the one you see directly adjacent to the address. That was reconfigured. We will take it back to the original dimension. We will install all new on the front-facing portion of the structure, new fixed windows to match the existing configuration as illustrated on the original photograph. There's another graphic and three-dimensional depiction of how it's going to look. We are going to install fabric awnings, which we think is even more consistent than the original Bahama shutters that were on the house before the renovation occurred. These awnings will occur at each of the two front windows on the north-facing side, as well as the front entry. Our intentions are to rework let's see if I can get that photograph, the front stoop, which originally was extremely cumbersome. It was reworked and tiled. We were asked to reconsider the type of material that was used on that stoop. We are going to resurface that with a brick-like material to make it more consistent with the architecture of the time of construction. We're going to install 2 handrails on each side of the door and reconfigure and reinstall the planter that was removed. And last but not least, we are going to re-stucco the entire north front-facing portion of the structure to better coincide with the wood trowel finish that originally occurred on that home. Although not clearly depicted in that illustration, those are our intentions and that will occur. The next step is, and our intentions are, once this board does approve what we've proposed, we will incorporate those into the current set of construction drawings that we've completed. Those drawings are currently in the hands of the building department and have been reviewed for approval. Once we have decided which of these items, if not all, are going to be approved in order to let this project move forward, those will be incorporated into those permit documents, and we will work diligently to make sure that those are approved and the proper permitting has been issued. Once that's happened, we will move forward, hopefully, to allow the owner to close the sale on the property, and working with the new owner, we will continue to make modifications to the building under a separate application. In closing, I wanted to introduce Sam. Sam has a few words that he'd like to share with you that come directly from the owner. Sam?
Good evening. Sam Bauer. I have power of attorney granted from Mr. Ramia on behalf of matters concerning this property. I'm also a resident of Flamingo Park and Mr. Ramia's neighbor. I prepared this statement via telephone with Mr. Ramia, who wasn't able to attend for various reasons, one of which is a family matter in another country. First and foremost, he and I would like to thank the board and Frederic for their time and dedication. Mr. Ramia offers his sincerest apologies for his actions and wants you all to know that he has never before and certainly will never again make such a mistake. He was simply attempting to perform improvements to a severely neglected property and improve the neighborhood in which he resides. He had no idea he was doing anything illegal or inappropriate, and while ignorance of the law is not an excuse, he understands, that he has made some huge mistakes, and he's doing everything in his power to correct this. As you can see, he's retained an architect as well as an engineer, and has paid them to develop the plans, which have been submitted to the building department, as Steve had mentioned, and he has applied for all of his building permits. Additionally, he has already paid all of the fines and permit fees that have been assessed to date, and Frederic has graciously allowed all of the reviews to proceed with the exception of the building review, which cannot take place, obviously, until this process is complete. The reviews, including electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and gas, were completed as of 9/20, and we are in the process of providing the information to the building department to satisfy those comments and prepared to address any concerns. He also feels it's important that you understand that he is not a wealthy man. This purchase and improvements to this home represented his entire life savings. He's spent nearly everything he has on this endeavor and is willing to do whatever it takes to rectify the situation. And again, deeply and sincerely apologizes for his mistakes. Thank you for your time, and are there any questions?
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mittner.
Frederic Mittner giving a quick overview on 2164 806 Park Place, because I think the applicant covered it. This was a continued case for work done without approvals, neither building permit nor historic approvals in the Flamingo Park Historic District. This is on the, this is the images of the work that was already completed, north and south elevations, and the historic photograph that we've been able to obtain of what it looked like before with the clamshell awnings here. And then the Bahama shutters that have been installed in a closed position, the modification of the entry, some of the window modifications, loss of sills, and actually we thought it was a metal aluminum trellis installed here. So here's some other images of, again, before. Under those Bahama shutters, there was a change in opening size there. Again, the before and after that the board saw last month and commented on. And the applicant came back, and we believe that by making the recommended corrections that the applicant has presented, this will bring it more into compliance with what it was originally. These fabric awnings is much more of a mission style. They've even addressed the entry feature. So by following their recommendations, I think this does bring it into compliance. And as they stated, there is a purchaser that is looking to make build an addition at the rear of the structure and would come through full approvals through the historic board. The buyer is fully aware of that, and hence the focus has been primarily on the north elevation on the modifications. So we are recommending approval with those conditions, with the proposed amendments, and I'll leave that slide up.
Questions of staff?
So, Ms. Midner, your recommendation is approve with conditions or approve as is?
Approve with all these recommended corrections to occur.
That are part of the case?
Yes.
No. Okay. Thank you.
I have kind of a similar question there. In preparing the approval of this, would you use the wording partially conforms to the standards of the Department of Interior?
Well, again, it's not ideal. Again, the work was done without approvals. You know, some of the original materials were lost. However, this would bring it into compliance as best as possible, given the situation.
As a result of the conditions that are being applied, okay. The other question I have is, might be more appropriate for the architect. And this is just out of curiosity, the awnings. What would be, do you estimate the life of those awnings? The material being used, the fabric or whatever, right? Is it more, let's say, fade resistant than previous sort of materials that would have been used for those types of awnings? Does it have more strength?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's got, awnings or umbrellas at their homes right now know the fabrics have really come a long way as far as their technology, the sunbrellas and things like that. I can't give you an exact lifespan, but they do last a long time. And the nice thing is that they can easily be replaced if need be. It's not a permanent structure.
Right.
They can be reslung, so to speak, but I would imagine you'd get
Okay.
10, 7 years out of those.
Yeah, I knew the technology has advanced quite a bit, and I was just curious about that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any further questions of staff? Do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on this? Ms. Pullum.
I just can't resist an opportunity, Nancy Pullum speaking from Belmont Road, to say this is a little person who's now made a mistake and it owns up to it in a very humble way from the very beginning, and has now gone to a great deal of expense to plead their case and make it right as best they can. And there's been a lot of explanation of what's going to be done. And I juxtapose that with the prior case of giving a developer 10 years of tax abatement on a vacant lot with only an explanation that is given to me as the layperson. Code doesn't say they can't do it. And nobody presses for more information or at least an explanation to the public.
Excuse me, if you don't mind, I don't find this relevant to this particular case. You're not really addressing.
My hat goes off to these people, as I said, Mr. Pinckney, for going to great lengths and expense to make it right. And I commend them. And it's kind of in my mind, an unequal treatment of a very small person with a very limited pocketbook, apparently, who is doing that, and I give them a lot of credit for it, vis-a-vis the opposite. Thank you.
Okay. Any further public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll now go into executive session. Any discussion?
I basically would just thank the applicant for listening to us and making these adjustments. I actually like the fabric awning 1,000% more than I do a clamshell. I think it's nice, and I think it adds a lot of character to the house and then, of course, to the neighborhood. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can't recover the lost materials, but I think that this is an acceptable proposal, to solve the situation and, to restore the house back to as close as possible to what was before.
I agree. We appreciate your efforts and the sincerity in them, and perhaps you could advise your new client who will be purchasing that they might inquire with Ms. Mittner about the tax exemption program for their addition that was referenced. And with that, would someone like to make a motion?
I move the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 21-64 for alterations, work already completed, in accordance with standards 9 and 10, set forth in section 94-49 of the City Zoning and Land Development Regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the historic preservation element of the comprehensive plan of the City of West Palm Beach, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and the additional compatibility criteria set forth in section 94-49 of the City Zoning and Land Development Regulations. The conditions are should we list it, or the conditions are the recommended corrections included in the package submitted and reviewed in tonight's meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Your case is approved. Thank you. With that, we are going to take a 5-minute break. We will resume. I'm just going to say we'll resume at 7:10 because I don't know